Man, so welcome to those of you at mochurch.tv. Welcome to my people in the room. You're beautiful. Look at you. Man, you look so good. Some of you smell good. So I grew up primarily with my grandparents through second grade, and then eventually I moved in with my mom and my stepdad, Joe, and I went back to my grandparents anytime that it was not a school night, on the weekends and the summer and for breaks. And so I grew up with my grandparents, and I called my grandmother Ema when I was really little, and I called my grandfather Epa, and it just stuck. And so most of my life, I called them Ema and Epa. When I was really, really young, like preschool, I would sleep in my grandmother's bed, and I would sleep with like one of those like baby blankets, you know, that has like the silky edges. And that kind of helped me fall asleep at night. I'd play with the edge, like the silky edge, and that would be like the thing that comforted me, soothed me, and I'd fall asleep. And eventually, like a couple years later or whatever, still kind of preschool age, eventually my grandmother would get in bed, watch TV in bed, and I'd reach over and I'd grab her hair, and I'd start playing with her hair as like the silky edge thing, and that was like how I fell asleep when I was really, really young. Well, later when I got to school age, started going to kindergarten and first grade, living with my grandparents and them raising me, I slept in my grandfather's room, and in that room, I would go to bed earlier than he would because it was a school night, and he was a grown man, so he stayed up and would watch sitcoms and things like that on television. And I remember just like in the darkness of his room, well, first off, my grandfather's room was funny because the images that stand out to me of him were he must have come home from work and like, I don't know, on his break at lunch or whatever, gone to buy like a bottle of pop back in the day, buy like a bottle of pop, and he'd always have change in his pocket. So when he'd come home, apparently just take all the change, just throw it on his floor. And it was like an inch of snow in his room, but with silver change. And so I remember as a kid being fascinated, like, he is rich. Like, this is like Scrooge McDuck's room, you know? Like, this is amazing. And under his bed, there was like, it looked like a homemade wooden box. And in it were all sizes and colors of marbles. Like all like big marbles, little, all different colors and, you know, cloudy looking ones. And as a little kid, I just thought, this is a cool, where did he get these from? It's like a treasure chest, and thought it was the coolest. So at night, though, when I'd go to bed by myself, I would be so nervous in the dark. And at the end of the bed, it was a small room, but there was like a chair that had clothes on it. And I don't know if the timing of this is right in my head, but looking back, I remember one night thinking I saw a monster in one of the chairs and just being like, there is something sitting there. And it, like looking back, I thought it was Greedo, the character from Star Wars, that him and Han, you know, who shot first. Okay, if you're not a Star Wars fan, just move along. We'll move along. But it looked like Greedo. I was like, Greedo's in my room. And I was really scared, you know, like, Grandpa, Epa. You know, he'd come in, there's nothing there. There's clothes, you know, on a chair. But I also remember that when he'd watch sitcoms at night, it was hard for me to go to sleep, and so I would sometimes sneak out of the room, and I'd crawl down the hallway like army crawl, and his back was to me at the hallway, and he'd watch the television, and I could watch the television from the hallway kind of over his shoulder, and back then it was a television set. It was a piece of furniture. I mean, it was, you know, you couldn't move that thing without 7 people coming over to help. And so, you know, there were pictures on top of it, all that kind of stuff. And so I would sit there and I'd watch stuff that he was watching. And in my mind, this really tells you the exact era, because a song that was really popular at that time, I did a parody of it in my head when I'd start sneaking down the hallway. I'd start sneaking. I'd be, oh, sneak out. So free. And so I would sing that in my head as I was going down the hallway. So anyways, but it was years later. I think I was in my early to mid-30s, which is where I'm at still right now. But early to mid-30s before it actually hit me. I'd never thought of it. They had separate rooms. Oh my gosh, how does this never occur to me? My grandparents slept in separate beds. What in the way? And I didn't know where to put that in my brain. I was like, man, I've seen old movies because there's a thing. I've looked it up. There's a thing early in the 20th century where physicians actually would tell people it is healthier to sleep in separate beds because you don't know what kind of funk is rising out of them exhaling over there. Like, so you've seen like old sitcoms or whatever where like the married couple have twin beds next to each other. That's kind of what it came from. It's like culturally people are like, man, you are funky, and there's some exhaust coming up out of you. I'm going to get my own bed, and I'm going to be over here, you'll be over there. And so, but I don't know what it was, but they were in totally separate rooms, and it wasn't a medical thing. It wasn't anything like that. But honestly, I just didn't know where to file that in my brain because It took me a couple of decades or so to even recognize, like, oh, yeah, there's my grandparents, so I never even thought of that. They don't sleep together. And, looking back, you might say, well, they're grandparents, okay? But when I do the math, I was 5 years old. My EPA was like 47. My grandma was like 45. And contrary to what you may think, that's not old. Like, man, that is nuts. I don't get it. Well, my mom and my stepdad, I eventually moved in with them and was there when I had to be there. And they did sleep together. Yeah, sure, they had a room and a bed together. But there was an interesting thing that popped up among, their conversations a lot of times, and that was they were both really hard-working, blue-collar people, but we would go to dinner, and on the way to dinner, at dinner, during dinner, sometimes after dinner, there was this really strange, awkward conversation that would go on between them about who was paying for dinner. Like, okay, I'm going to cover dinner tonight. I got dinner tonight or whatever. Like, oh, no, you should next time. You should pay for it. No, I paid for it last time. There would be this, like, slight argument, and it was so weird. It was so dysfunctional. It was so awkward to always be in the car, in the room for that conversation, arguing who is paying for the meal tonight? Who's covering this thing that we're doing? Who's paying for the baseball game we're going to see up in Detroit? And so the more I grew up, the more I learned how much my mom actually naturally kept things secret from my stepdad when it came to how she spent her money. And so it was so strange. Like, often there was sentences like, don't tell Joe about it. He doesn't know. The older I got as a teenager, don't tell Joe about this. Like, let's keep this quiet. This is a secret. Like, hey, Joe doesn't know that I get these things for your little brother. Whatever it was, like, wow. And he did the same thing. He really kept quiet what he spent his money on and what women in the neighborhood he was also sleeping with. So there was just some secrets that were going on there that was just like, man, why doesn't he let her in? Talk about his girlfriends. And he just didn't. And so, man, this was just one sign. Money wasn't the only thing wrong with their relationship. And by the way, they were one of those couples who stayed together for my little brother until he graduated from high school. We're going to stick it out until he graduates. And so eventually they divorced. I have a close friend who, when he was newly married, and he looks back and admits this and is like, yeah, this is exactly what was going on. But he and his wife, they got married, but the funny thing is they lived completely like two single people who lived together, totally separate lives except for when their friend group got together, and then they hung out with their friends together. But other than that, everything, they even have separate grocery lists, which is kind of inconvenient, like we each take our trip to the grocery store to get our stuff. And, different people have different diets. That's not unusual. Different milks they drink, not unusual. But one time, my friend was coming home from work, and his newlywed wife, his new bride, called him while he was in the car and said, hey, on your way home, would you mind picking up my milk? I ran out of my milk for me. Would you mind stopping and picking up? And in a really whiny voice, he said, oh, come on. I don't want to stop at the store. Can't you go to the store and buy your own milk? I was like, oh, man, dude. I mean, he told me that knowing it was a big fail. Like, that is like you took the L on that one, dude. Like, I know that was really stupid, or whatever. I'm so selfish. I was just so individualistic and unwilling to make minimal sacrifices for the sake of the other person. And unfortunately, my friend and his wife weren't married very long. So there's something that's, true for all people, and that there's this radical self-centeredness inside of the sinful human heart. I mean, it's not just them or you or whatever, It's every human being inside of the sinful heart of a human being, just a radical self-centeredness. Like, self-centeredness is just havoc-wreaking problem in many marriages, and it is ever present as an enemy in every marriage. Like, it always has to be dealt with. We're human beings. It has to be dealt with. And it's the cancer at the center of a marriage when it begins, so it has to be dealt with. And the famous love chapter that maybe you've heard quoted before, maybe, 1 Corinthians 13 in the Bible, it goes through and says, love is patient, love is kind. It says all these things about love. And one of the things it says in verses 4 and 5 is that love is not self-seeking. And that's funny because it's saying love is the opposite of self-seeking, which self-seeking is literally pursuing your own welfare over the welfare of others. And so the idea is love is the opposite of that. I'm looking out for your good. I would make sacrifices for your good. And so we're in the second week of a series called Love in Cleave-Land, and we're in Genesis 2, and we're really covering one simple verse where the creation account has happened. As I talked about last week, God creates the first man, Adam, creates the first woman, Eve, and in light of that creation, Moses commentates, who wrote Genesis, that is why a man leaves his father and mother, last week we talked about that, leaving, and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. So the Hebrew word there for united, this is an accurate translation, united, but it's kind of a weak translation because really it means to stick to. Like he'll leave his father and mother and he'll stick to his wife. He will cling very closely to his wife. They will bond together as individuals and become one unit. And so here's the old King James Version from 1611, says this in the Old English. Therefore shall a man leave his father and mother and shall cleave, that's the Old English, unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. So the idea I mentioned last week is the idea of to leave and cleave. And I'm a rapper. I like that. It rhymes. Leave and cleave, leave and cleave. So what does this radical unity or oneness look like in Cleave-Land? So one of the modern day elements, we have an object lesson here. One of the modern day elements of, you gonna stare me down right now? Is what you can do? He's like, you gotta want it, Smith. You gotta want it. So one of the modern day kind of elements of a wedding ceremony. Thank you very much, Andre. He kept asking me, when do I bring it up? When do I bring it up? I looked at him. He was looking down. He's on his phone. He's like texting me. No, I'm just playing. So one of the modern day elements inside of some wedding services is the unity candle. And I think it's a good image. It's a good kind of object lesson for what marriage is. And the idea is that typically, the way I've seen it or done it, is the minister officiating or Joey Tribbiani, whoever's officiating, basically they have, before the service really begins fully, maybe it's the first thing in the programming after ushers seat people, is a representative from the bride's side, maybe the bride's mom, will come down and she'll light a candle that represents their family. And so over here you've got the Smiths, And then on this side, the groom's mother might come up and light the other side for the Joneses, And so the Smiths and the Joneses, these are the family candles, the representation. And then during the ceremony, like after the groom and the groomsmen are down here and the bride comes forward and everybody's in awe and then people slowly remember to stand up like they should and all that stuff. They come down and there's a point in the ceremony where the unity candle is then lit. And so the bride takes her candle representing the Smiths. He takes his representing the Joneses. And together they light this center candle. And the idea is the picture of, okay, a flame, you don't see any separation at all. We are joined as one. There's a new family unit that is blended now. It's this, conjoining, the confluence of two families. And so it's one. Like there's no way to separate that flame. That is one flame. That is unity. That's it. And all three are still lit. So there's the original family, new family. And if the bride is really like annoyed by her mother-in-law when she does this, she might finish and go, she'd be like, none for you. I know. So I wore an old jersey. I was afraid my Kittle jersey would catch on fire. And I'd be like, I would really regret that. So anyway, I did read a story from a bride online who did admit that when they did their unity candle lighting, she still had her veil down. And when she leaned forward, her veil caught on fire. Like, wow. I think that's an omen. That's a bad omen. And if you had a soloist at that wedding, I like to picture she's singing an Alicia Keys song. That girl is on fire. Just killing it. Like Katniss Everdeen dress where she spins around and it goes up in flames. It's like, oh yeah, that's good stuff. So, but this is the picture. I love this picture because it's unity. Like this is the idea of the unity candle is it all comes from that scripture. The two become one. There's no separating us now. This is unity in Cleave-Land. So what does that look like? What does that radical unity look like? This might be a strange sermon today. Because for some people, you'll just be like, yeah, duh. Other people might be like, that's the weirdest stuff I've ever heard. Why would they would even talk about that at church? It's just weird concepts. But what does that radical unity look like? Well, let me give some examples. A man is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. So when the two become one, some of the images here that have always historically been there for marriage was the two households became one household. And so the idea was, that was when, okay, now how ancient is this in our culture now? But that was when people would move in together. And the two households would become one. And now we got to start learning you do it at some point. And so the point was, when we're married and become one, that's when we'll have one home. The National Marriage Project did a study called The State of Our Unions. And that's so clever. And it said a substantial body of evidence indicates that those who live together before marriage are more likely to break up after marriage. And the funny thing is that study, in some way or another, has come out so many times, is that there is a correlation that if you don't wait to become one household until you're married, for whatever reason, there's a correlation that you are more likely to last. You're more likely to divorce or to break up or whatever, and not to last after marriage. And I think it has something to do with just the idea of, because that's difficult, especially in our day and age and culture. It's difficult because there is a certain level of self-control that you have to learn to practice. Because, of course, the concept was we're not going to unite sexually until we get married. And so that requires tremendous self-discipline. And so the idea is, okay, then we become one household and we sleep together. But by practicing that self-discipline, that means that when you're married and you have worked on that self-discipline, you are less likely to ruin this union by making a mistake when things aren't going well at home. You're in conflict about something, but there's someone at work who is attractive. And they're really interested in your stories and will listen to you and share interests and all that kind of stuff. And because you haven't practiced the discipline of saying no, that this would feel good emotionally, physically, all that stuff, you haven't worked on that, then it's more likely that you aren't prepared for that kind of struggle and temptation once the two become one and are united in the middle. So we're going to talk more about that in general next week at our PG-12 rated service where we talk about sex in Cleave-Land. So we'll just move along. Next one, another example is, and this is kind of related similarly, but that's when the two start sharing a bed, And, that's the thing I was with my grandparents, what? They sleep separate? I've never even pictured that for married people, and somehow it was a blind spot that I didn't notice all the time I lived with my grandparents. They didn't sleep in the same bed or even the same bedroom. But according to the National Sleep Foundation, around 25% of married couples in America choose to sleep in separate beds. Now, I want to be super clear. I'm not talking about I have trouble sleeping because I'm not used to being in a bed with someone, or there's sleep apnea, night terrors, sleepwalking, sleep talking, all that kind of stuff. I'm not talking about any of that kind of stuff. There are lots of people who have different sleep schedules, and they just struggle to be in the same bed, because he's sawing logs over here, and she can't take it, and he violently turns into sleep, and she'll wake up with a black eye because he's violently moving around or whatever. I've even heard there are freaks out there who hum and sleep and sing in their sleep. Freak out. Yeah, of course I didn't know. Okay, I didn't know till I married Shannon. She's like, do you know? You hum and sing in your sleep? I was like, no. Oh, my grandma never told me that when I was playing with her hair when I was a little kid. I hum and sing. Oh, yeah. You get it, too. You're like, I can't usually understand what you're saying, but you're all like, just killing it. And I'm like, man, you've got to video that if you get a chance sometime. There's not time. I mean, it's a quick solo. It's a feature. And you're off the song, And so, crazy. When we got married, and had been married for a few years, Shannon used to have a job teaching in high school in the D.C. area. And the commute, because it's D.C., it wasn't far away, but it took her 3.5 hours to get there. So she got up at 4:30 a.m. or something like that. And I would go to bed, and I would read Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time, and there's like 1,000 pages each, and at that time only 7 books were out, so I'd stay up late reading, and maybe at midnight Shannon would be sleeping for hours at that point. And all of a sudden, next to me, Shannon did this in her sleep, laying down. And I'm like, what the crap? Like, I start to protect myself. Like, what is about to happen right now? Like, I thought some witch stuff, like witchcraft going on. And all of a sudden, her arm goes up like this. And then the other arm comes up like, what is going on? What is going on? And then she started doing this. This is definitely some witchcraft stuff. This is definitely some witch. Well, it turns out when she was a kid, her mom used to rub her arm like that to help her go to sleep. Just arm laying next to her, not floating in the air, levitating. I was like, dude, do you know what you do in your sleep? No, what do I do or whatever? Oh, I'd way rather be singing. I would way rather be singing in my sleep. Just say that or whatever. And so I'm not talking about any of that stuff, that weird stuff that you'll find out. I'm talking about more concerned with the person who is trying to intentionally make a move to show I'm distancing myself from you, or I'm punishing you, and I'm separating from you emotionally by not sleeping in the same bed. Like, yeah, there's some things we've been talking about, and we're not in agreement about how to do this or how to do that, or some stuff with the kids or whatever. And you're sending a message by distancing yourself from your spouse, and so or maybe it's from avoiding conflict, and intimacy, and so it just becomes one more nail in the coffin of the relationship to kind of show that it's not working. Ephesians 4 has this interesting little tidbit that says, do not let the sun go down while you are still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold. And because of that, a lot of Christian couples have taken a principle from that to say, hey, when we have a conflict, when we argue, let's make sure we don't go to bed angry. Let's make sure we at least have a conversation. Be like, I know we don't agree on this. It doesn't have like you got to resolve it all, but to have a conversation and to kind of like turn that anger in a different direction, because usually like anger plus a good night's sleep starts turning into bitterness. Like I'm waking up and I'm not white hot angry anymore, but it's like deeply seated in me now. Like, you suck, And so the idea is like, hey, let's try to resolve, have a question, or at least have a conversation about this. Like, hey, I don't agree with you, but I'm not going to be mad at you about it. We'll talk about it more when we have time. But ultimately, what matters is keeping a marriage fortified and unified with a good, healthy balance of emotional and physical intimacy. But you need both, and so part of that might be making a huge move to say, man, I've started making a habit of just sleeping in the guest room. Not because he snores or sleep apnea or because he has a machine when he's sleeping, right? Nothing like that. It's because I've been sending a message and we've been avoiding conflict, or, he or she has been doing that. So another image, and this is a tough one, is the idea of like financially we unite and become one unit together. We combine our finances. We join our bank accounts and all that. And that is a really real example of the two becoming one, because that's kind of like where the rubber meets the road, right? Like that is like a big thing. So in Cleave-Land, the idea is we can't get married and then just keep all of our things separate. Like my buddy did when he got married. It's like everything's separate except kind of when we hang out as friends. So we keep this separate, this separate, this separate. And we're just like single people who happen to, have a certificate together and happen to live in the same place. According to the State of Mental Health 2022 report, money is one of the biggest things that spouses fight about. We don't need a report to tell us that, do we? Like, you have friends, people. Like, this is at the top or second to the top of most people's list when tension is going to be created, when fights are going to happen. Often it's about money. And so why? Because money touches everything in your life. Like when you're married, it touches everything in your life. And so there was an article, a Yahoo News article, December 9th of last year, 2022, and they shared a finding from Cornell University and the University of Colorado, a study that basically said in married couples in America, 65% have joint accounts, 12% have separate accounts, 22 have kind of some combo of both. And so how do those differences make an impact on marriage? Well, they did this extensive study that's been going on for years. And Joe Gladstone, the assistant professor of marketing at University of Colorado, he said this. He said, we've studied thousands of couples, not 12, thousands of couples over many years studying their relationship satisfaction. And what we found is that couples who have joint accounts stay together longer. There's some level of intimacy that they reach that's another level by combining and uniting in their finances. And so he said they found that couples with joint accounts stay together longer, they're more satisfied in their relationships, and also they spend money more sensibly. Because you're both not getting to just like splurge, and whatever I want and whatever my impulse leads me to, I need these jeans right now, and those kinds of things. So otherwise, unity in Cleave-Land, it makes married couples happier to have that level of unity and intimacy. And that makes sense. So separate accounts, they kind of tend to foster some distrust. Like, is he still giving money to his ex? He doesn't need to be giving money to his ex. What's he giving money to his ex for? Is he still doing that? Or is she still making big purchases, like without telling me about it? Is she sneaking, hiding money, stashing money, making big purchases? I don't think I've seen that coat before. There's this weird level of distrust that starts happening. Is he gambling? Is he spending money on hooch? Is he spending money on liquor? What's he doing? Isn't that a fun word, hooch? Turner and hooch. And so, there's this distrust, but combining accounts and budgeting together, it's weird. It has this way of building trust. The transparency together as a couple and unifying with that. And so combining your income and your accounts, it forces you to combine also your goals, your dreams, also, and this is a big one, your fears. You have to combine it. You have to talk about your future together, and you have to talk about your past. This is what I've seen. This is what I've experienced. This is how I know it was done in my family of origin or whatever. And so if you unify your money, the funny thing is that you tend to increase your communication for your whole marriage, not just the communication about money. It's like, because that's such an awkward topic, if you can start communicating well about that, wow, does that impact the rest of your relationship in ways that you communicate well about intimacy and sex and in-laws and all these other things, who's doing what chores, and all the stuff that is awkward. It just helps. Financial expert Larry Burkett, he says, money is either the best or the worst area of communication in our marriages. So usually you're doing really well at it, you're doing really badly at it. And so, man, not much, I don't think there's been much more of a unifying thing than when Shannon and I, eventually, we always had joint accounts when we got married, but when we actually started budgeting together and having to talk, like dig in there and talk about that, I can't, it's almost a feeling that I can't describe that I haven't gotten from any other part of any other relationship or our relationship. There was this sense of unifying and calming and satisfying and peace-giving, frankly, a little bit sexy. Like, there was something intimate about us combining and talking about our finances. It was very intimate in a way that I hadn't experienced in any other way. And so there's something there. And if your spouse doesn't want to combine, say you're somebody who's like, man, I've been pushing for that, but my spouse doesn't want that, and maybe you're both in the room, which is really awkward right now, But I would encourage you, a solution to this is always, or part of the solution is always be vulnerable. Like, to say to your spouse, like, man, be very vulnerable. I don't like, that we're so separate in our money, our finances. It worries me. Like, frankly, it makes me fearful. Like, not just for our finances, but for our relationship and our communication. And that should be a huge thing for them to hear you being vulnerable on this topic. It should be. And so maybe even ask the question, why? Like, why don't you want to? And try to get to the root of what is it that makes them hesitate to actually unite in the area of our finances for the two to become one, and get to the root of it. Like, is it trust issues? Is it he or she has an attitude of entitlement, like, I make this money, I want to spend it? Or is it more of like, no, the issue is because you're a nag all the time. The issue for me is because I feel like you micromanage and are too controlling. Like, what is the why on why they hesitate to unite? And so maybe even nerd out. If you're the nerd in the relationship, bring a spreadsheet and show, like, this is how we could do so much better financially if we pay attention together and we attack this together. Because I'm telling you, speaking of winning financially, just doing well, destroying debt and saving for retirement and all those different things, being generous, all those things, it's really hard to win at that stuff when you're running on two different racetracks. So you have to kind of combine together and be like, let's talk about our combined goals. And if you can't resolve it, man, I would really suggest talking to a marriage counselor, because this is a big red flag for your marriage to say, we're going to keep this separate. The two become one, but when we lit that unity candle, I was kind of lying, because I want separate accounts. I want to stay separate with our money completely. You got your money. You'll buy dinner sometimes. Sometimes I'll buy it. We'll make it really awkward for the kids, you know? So, if you're on the same page, one simple thing can be just to then start working on changing your pronouns. Like, we want to do this, we just haven't. To work on changing your pronouns, like I saw this picture. If you're married, there should be no such thing as my money or your money. It's our money. And it takes a while to train your brain to say that. Instead of saying, he's got all this school debt from college, or I have all this in my retirement. We have this in our retirement. We have this debt. From my husband's college, career, or from his master's degree, or from her master's, whatever. Financial guru Dave Ramsey talks about how when he was younger, he was really in, like, real estate was his game. It still is. But he was over-leveraged in real estate, and his creditor company basically was taken over by a larger bank, and he was asked to pay back his outstanding amount in a really short amount of time. And so he went bankrupt. And so it was really tragic for his family. And his wife, Sharon, she didn't have anything to do with his financial decisions to keep borrowing to buy houses and over leverage and all that stuff. He said, it was all my fault, Dave says. But their water was turned off, the electric was turned off, and she was home with babies. And he said she wasn't just scared, she was terrified. And Dave said, the thing is, Sharon didn't do this. It was happening to her. Because she didn't have any say in the finances. He just did it because that's his world. He was good at finances, and she felt like she wasn't. That's often the case in a couple, in a marriage. And that's where strengths and weaknesses kind of help when you combine is, it helps you guys kind of combine so that the weaker one can learn about, and you can be together and unified in those finances. But often in marriage, there's kind of like one spouse standing back criticizing how things are going with the money and the finances. And this is a way to kind of remedy like the taking of shots from one to the other, because Dave Ramsey's like, now we make financial decisions together. We budget together. We have a plan and goals together. So now Sharon can't blame me for anything because it's half her fault. It's like, this is what we did together. We decided this together. So, you get the dubs together, you take the L's together is basically what happens then, and that's marriage. And so that's what it looks like to be united in Cleave-Land. And just to kind of end with a really practical note, combining accounts is just easier. Like, to be honest, to be married and to do what you have to do with roommates, which back in the day was, I was going to write you a check for my part of the rent. Now it's like, okay, let me Zelle you for that, let me Venmo you for that, let me Cash App you for that. In a marriage, it is just easier to be like, we got one budget, we got one account. I'm not always having to Zelle you money for the groceries or the insurance or whatever it is. So marry your bank accounts. The two become one. That's unity in Cleave-Land. One more that I'll touch on before I move on is the two become one. And I think one of the coolest things that can be the case with marriage is that together you become one unified serving unit. And what I mean by that is, a buzzword in Christianity is ministry. And that sounds like, we hire some professional to do stuff. But ministry is something that every Christian does. It just means serving God and serving others because you love Jesus. Trying to be like Jesus, so serving God and serving others in the name of Jesus. And so there's this cool little almost vignette in Acts chapter 18 in the Bible that talks about a Jew named Apollos. He was a native of Alexandria, and he came to a Greek city called Ephesus. It says he was a learned man and with a thorough knowledge of the Scriptures. He had been instructed in the way of the Lord, and he spoke with great fervor and taught about Jesus accurately, though he only knew the baptism of John. So I won't get far into this, but they're talking about John the Baptist, the forerunner of Jesus. John the Baptist was kind of the opening band, and Jesus was the main headliner. And so John came around baptizing people, but then Jesus came along, and there was something different about Jesus' baptism. You eventually were baptized in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And honestly, it was a simple thing that Apollos he didn't get the upgrade. He didn't get the update on that. He's like, I'm doing what John the Baptist did. He went around baptizing, a baptism of repentance is what they called it. And so he was kind of behind the times slightly on that. So it says in verse 26, he began to speak boldly in the Jewish synagogues. And when Priscilla and Aquila, a strong Christian couple, which pause there, of the times that this couple is mentioned, this married couple in Scripture, most often her name is mentioned first because she was probably the most influential of the two, the most prominent of the two. So Priscilla, that's the female, was often mentioned before her husband, which is Aquila. And so the strong Christian couple, they heard Apollos preaching, and they invited him into their home and explained to him the way of God more adequately. They just updated him on some stuff like, oh, you've been in some pocket somewhere preaching and missed what happened, and that is that Jesus instituted a new baptism in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and you're still rocking with an 8-track player when there's MP3s now, dude, And so basically it's just this little vignette of a Christian couple who had been learning under the teacher of the great apostle Paul. So they're learning a bunch of great stuff from him. They traveled with him and had a business together, actually. It was a tent-making business. And so now they gently give some important doctrinal lessons to an already great preacher just to help him grow. And I just love that picture because there's just this cool image of their unity, of how they serve together. And there's this one small piece of what a Christian couple, how they can be unified in service and in ministry. They invited people into their home. Apollos was one of them, so they were hospitable together. Kind of this attitude of, and I know many people at Momentum have it, this isn't really my house, it's God's house. I want to use it for God's stuff. And that might be entertaining some teenagers so they have a safe place in the block, that they can hang out with our kids, and we want to make our house that safe place. But this is God's house. We're going to use it for God's stuff. They probably shared a meal with Apollos. Feeding a preacher is always a godly thing, people. Anytime you can do that, any good ethnic foods, that's just God. Extra credit, man, extra credit. And so they discuss Jesus and sound doctrine with Apollos. And some couples, not all, but they even taught together. Like you picture this being, honestly, I kind of picture, because she's always mentioned first, I picture her being the one that's the one able to kind of let me talk you through this. And him, yeah, that's a good point. And here's another point. But I kind of picture her leading this conversation and being the one that's more vocal of the two. And so, man, what a dream to unite. And I know some of you long for this, and that breaks my heart, but I know some of you long for this, to be in a relationship or in a relationship like this, where you have this opportunity to unite and say, we get to make an impact together. But some of you, honestly, are just a conversation away from that happening. Like, we've just never talked about what does it look like to be united in mission. And the truth is, sometimes he has some gifts in this area and passions that are separate from yours, and that's okay. You can be supportive but not be in those things. And she has some passions in this. Like, he might really dig investing in dudes who are in a men's prison. And you can pray for him and encourage him with that, help him prepare for stuff, whatever. She might be like, man, I want to invest in pregnant teenagers. Like, I just really have a heart for pregnant teenagers. He might want to coach a softball team for the church in a beer league, because nobody wants to be in a church league. That's just, it's a nightmare. So, we're in a beer league, but here's our church team. And, she might be like, man, I love being at Momentum's, birth to toddlers class or whatever. And so you can have different interests and gifts, but I challenge you to think about and talk about what are the ways that we can be totally united in mission? What are some of the things that we can do to volunteer side by side? What are some of the things that we can think about and create together? What are some ways that we can give together and agree to budget for giving in this way? Combine your Wonder Twin powers, let them activate, and say, how can we do something for the sake of God's kingdom that we're united in that mission? And that can look totally different for every couple. There's other miscellaneous stuff, like you become one decision-making unit together. You become one parenting unit if you have children together. We don't undercut people, and, we each other. We talk together, and we decide this is how we'll move forward in this difficult situation with one of our kids. And you don't throw them under the bus and I'm like, yeah, I really wanted to let you do this, Mom said. That's not the kind of stuff we do. We're unified. You do the unified front thing. We have decided. We change our pronouns. We have decided what would be best, talking to your kid about the situation. And naturally, I think unity and the unity candle ultimately represents both of you need to cheer for the same teams. Like, there shouldn't be a Pittsburgh Steeler fan in a healthy marriage. I'm talking about healthy marriages here. A Yankees fan, a Michigan fan, okay, Celtics fan. No, the Lord in the scriptures calls that being unequally yoked. Like one of you is just way off spiritually and the other one is right on, okay? And so, but here's the interesting, if you're married, here's the challenge. Talk about this question, because I may not have touched on anything that you struggle with, but talk about this question. It might be a quick conversation. Where are we divided where we should be united? As a married couple. If you're dating, you can talk about what that will look like in the future, but you ain't got to unite in everything, okay, as a date. That's the beauty of dating, okay? Oh, you like that? I'm going to figure out if I want to get behind that ever, That's an interest? Oh, that's a really interesting interest. You collect porcelain sea animals? Wow, fun with that. So ask the question, where are we two where we should be one? Where are we two where we should be one? It's worth talking about. Last week I talked to Sheila Mills, who is Regional Program Director for Encompass Christian Counseling. She is an LPCCS, that's a lot of letters, but that means a licensed professional clinical counselor with supervision designation. Otherwise, she's brilliant. This is what it means. But she said that when she counsels couples who are thinking about marriage, she tells them, man, everyone, listen to me, everyone brings baggage into their relationships. Everyone. And so she said to have a healthy marriage, you have to have two healthy people. To have a healthy marriage, you have to have two healthy people. And so she said, when I counsel people, I tell people, maybe you need to be spiritually discipled before you get married by a godly person who is married and has been for a little while. Maybe as a couple, you need to be discipled by a Christian couple who are older than you, a little bit older than you, or way older than you, and just kind of learn from them and let them ask you tough questions and challenge you. Or maybe you even need to go to counseling and therapy to work through why you feel like things in a relationship need to be a certain way when it's actually a way to be still separate within marriage. And so, you might have just this picture of, man, my mom and dad, they had joint accounts, but my dad was freaking awful with money, and my mom suffered from it the whole time because he's an idiot off doing this, or whatever. So therefore, I will always have separate accounts and be separate in marriage. And so what happens is you end up with like this solution that creates more continued separation within a marriage. And really, it's an unhealthy overreaction to someone who was doing it the right way, but there was still unhealth in it. There was still they're doing it the right way, but it's not going well because someone's really unhealthy. So you're like, well, I'm going to do it the wrong way then. It'll be better. And so, just if you don't deal with that baggage that you're bringing in through counseling or discipleship, growing by learning from someone, that might be a few steps ahead of you spiritually, then you're really going to take away from your shot to have a healthy, unified, but imperfect marriage. Here's the deal. Strong marriages, they strengthen everyone and everything in their proximity. It's just the truth. So many of you have been blessed by strong marriages, whether it was your parents, whether it was somebody else, friends. And the same is true of weak marriages. They weaken everyone and everything in their path. I mean, there's so much. And so this is what the picture is it's worth talking about having a strong marriage. Like, what does that look like for us to be unified and be one, not two? What does that look like for the kid that's in our home and our close proximity, just always around us in our marriage? What does that look like? I know, wrong candle earlier. Shh. Did I do that one? Yeah, wrong candle. Sorry. What does it look like for the kid in the neighborhood that's always coming over to play with our kid? He's in the proximity of this healthy, strong marriage. What does that look like for him to picture when he awkwardly sees his best friend's parents in the kitchen flirting with each other while they cook and kissing, and his best friend's like, oh my gosh, mom and dad, knock it off, and they're like, shut up, it's about to be tongue, okay? What does that do for the neighbor kid who sees a strong marriage, and he's like, they're French kissing over there, my mom and dad sleep in separate beds, sometimes separate houses. He's got 3 girlfriends. What does it do for the guy in the men's Mo group who the guy in Mo group isn't bashing his wife and talking about how dumb she is with finances and how she's clueless and blah, blah, blah. He speaks well of her. And he makes it really clear, like, our marriage is imperfect. We all got our flaws, but, man, I treasure my bride. Like, man, the people that are strengthened by it. The person at church that just happens to be watching you and stealing notes on your marriage, they're strengthened by the fact that you've been working on your marriage. And they know you're not perfect, but they're strengthened. And just over and over, people are strengthened. Everyone in the proximity of a strong marriage, there's some impact that's made by them. They give and contribute in a way that sends kids to church camp. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. This is worth talking about in your marriage. Last thing, Jesus validates Genesis 2:24. He actually quotes Moses. In fact, people call Jesus the new Moses. And the new Moses quotes the old Moses in Mark chapter 10. And he says this. He says, at the beginning of creation, God, quote, because he's talking about Genesis here, made them male and female. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united, cleave to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. End of quote. But Jesus goes on and commentates just a little bit more. He said, so they are no longer two, but one flesh. He just underscores it. And therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. Let's pray.